ready to start?
Sure, yeah.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the panel Film Bronies with Minty and Thoth Penswell. I think we'll start with an introduction.
Me? Hi, I'm Thoth Penswell. I'm one half of Riff Ponies, one half of TrotCon social media, and one half of this panel. I specifically wore this wardrobe today because the only way you can properly critique film or cinema is if you're dressed like this. Don't dress like me. Anyway, I love film. I graduate in film studies. Don't spend a small fortune on that, please. Don't, trust me. But I love studying it. Love talking about it. Love talking about it with my friend Minty here. And today we'll be talking to you about some of the pieces of cinema that have come from My Little Pony. And there's a lot to talk about. But Minty, you can lead us into that.
And I'm Minty Root. I've been working as a VFX artist and a CG journalist for movies, so I have some experience in the behind the scenes with movie productions. What I want to start with, the first disclaimer of the panel, this is not a review of the movies. People will talk about their opinions on how it feels like to watch the movies. It's not that they don't have points on their thing, it's just that this is not the point of the panel. We want to discuss the filmmaking of some of the movies. We really want to talk about some of the technical details that really go into them, from the cinematic techniques and how it affects the final product. And we don't want to just tell you that the movies are good or bad. We will let you figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Worst case scenario, just review bomb it on IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes, like a normal person does nowadays. Anywho, let's go right into it.
So let's start with the most infamous of them, the very first movie, My Little Pony from 1986.
Oh.
I want to point out a couple of details. For example, the runtime, which is pretty typical for an animated production. You have the budget, which is about $5.5 million, which is pretty low for the time. And you can look at the revenue it did, and you're gonna think, well, it did more than the budget, which is fair. But the typical rule of thumb for those movies is that you have to spend the same amount of money that you took to make the movie to just advertise it, which means that this movie did lose money in the overall. So we will talk a bit about some of what we may think could be the reason as to why. So this is not the only movie that was produced around that time. This was part of a three-picture deal. So you had My Little Pony the movie, the Transformers movie, and G.I. Joe the movie. And one of the things I'd like to point out for the first two, it's quite interesting. Those movies were released during summer, except G.I. Joe, which was a straight-to-video release. And one of the theories, one of the speculations as to why they wanted the movie to release in summer, in the 80s, we had movie theaters that were finally got air conditioning, which really helped for the projectors, but was also more convenient for the movie going experience. So during the summer, if it was really hot, just the idea of being able to go to a movie theater for over an hour, just with the kids who wouldn't complain about the heat, they get to see a movie, that could help a lot the revenue. And it didn't. Partly, if you look at the poster, for example, you're going to notice a couple of problems. You see the pony in the middle of the poster? That's not the main pony character.
Nope.
At all.
Nope. It's a very odd movie. We'll talk a little bit about it, but yeah, from the get-go, the poster, it's kind of just like, put ponies on it. I feel like a marketing executive just said, put ponies on it. The kids will get it.
And they also did the same mistake with the DVD where they put another pony, and at that point they should have at least watched the movie to know which one was the main character. That one, I think, appears for one scene. That's it.
Yep.
It's also important to know the context of the movie. At the time, we only had 2 TV specials. You had Rescue at Midnight Castle and Escape from Katrina. 2 TV specials that were later just cut out into some smaller episodes. So, how many of you have seen or at least heard of Rescue from Midnight Castle? So, can you name me a couple of characters you remember? Okay. You remember Firefly?
I do.
Applejack? Twilight? All memorable characters, right?
Yes.
How many of those characters are in the movie? Zero.
None of them. And that is the big thing about it, is that it feels like if you even have a passing familiarity with the opening couple of episodes and specials they did, even if you watch the movie, it's like you're being dropped into a property about 10 episodes in, even if you've already seen it. It's a very jarring experience, even with me being familiar with it from Riff Pony stuff and having made fun of it for years. It's part of our shtick. Watching My Little Pony the movie for this, when we first started talking about this, watching it, I'm like, I've watched this show for years. I still don't know any of these characters or what they're talking about here. There's no establishing the world. I mean, I'm talking from a script angle here. There's no establishing the normal world in it, which is, let's show you what's happening in Equestria or whatever they call it at that point. There's none of that. It's just taken for granted that you know all of these characters. They're going to refer to them as such. And if you don't, you're lost. Completely lost.
And you can't really go with the approach that we have some movies, part of cinematic universe have now. The idea that you'd expect some people to just catch an episode of something before, because back in the 80s, trying to get rental of the VHS tape for that could be much more difficult, or at least trying to catch it on TV. So no wonder this movie failed at the box office.
Yeah, I mean, did you mention the thing about the Care Bears movie, or should I?
Oh! Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, so the year previous, in 1985, before these three movies were released, and this was probably why they were produced, there was a Care Bears movie. You saw that we were talking about the budgets here. The budget for the My Little Pony movie was about $5.5 million. I believe the Care Bears movie was around the same. I want you to guess how much the Care Bears movie made theatrically. Throw a number out, anybody. 16? I hear 16. Any others? I heard 30. I'm pretty sure it made 55 million, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think I have an idea why Hasbro wanted to greenlight this.
Yeah, exactly. It made a ton of money. And if you looked back at that slide we just showed, My Little Pony the movie made 6 million.
And here's the worst part. The Care Bears movie had a sequel that same year.
Yep.
Called Care Bears, Care Bears the Movie 2. They didn't even call it The Care Bears. That's how lazy they were.
They ran out of budget to put the on there.
But they made back their money in comparison.
They had to save printing cost. But it's very and then what ended up happening with after the Pony movie is that the Transformers movie famously also flopped. But the difference there being is that I think the Transformers movie is actually worth some recognition and merit. But they were animated by the same company.
Yep.
And distributed by the Dino De Laurentiis company, which if you don't know who that is, very famous film producer, and was responsible for distributing other movies like Stephen King's Maximum Overdrive, Blue Velvet, and Evil Dead 2. And if you look at their Wikipedia page right now, you'll find, crammed in the middle of all those horror movies and really intense movies, My Little Pony the movie is in there. I guess they needed money. I don't know.
I can't believe that they released horror movies and Evil Dead 2.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's totally puzzling to me. It really is an enigma. But continue, because we were talking about movie theaters.
So here's the thing. Back in the days, you might have heard about things like the Academy ratio. One of the things with projectors, they couldn't afford to have too many standards, so they had to standardize to one format. And that was sort of the film viewing experience when it started. You can look, and if the movie is kind of boring to look at, you can look around the frame to see interesting things. it was really a tiny thing, like a postcard at arm's length in terms of size. But you're gonna see that the ratio itself is nearly a square instead of a large rectangle. And when TV arrived, they needed to find a way to make movie theaters more interesting. They decided to find approaches, and they wanted to use widescreen formats. And they still had projectors which were made for the Academy ratio. So they had to find ways to make sure that the picture would be wide enough. So what you would be stuck with is that you'd be stuck with a picture that had to fit that frame. And there's a couple of techniques to fit a wide frame in it. You could go, for example, you have Vista Vision, where instead of just having that on that side, vertically, you actually set it horizontally to actually have more length. You have things like anamorphic, where you use a lens where you squeeze the picture horizontally just to fit it on the frame. You have Techniscope, where you, instead of using 4 perforations for that, you just go and you cut it in half like that. Or you go with the spherical approach. What they did with the My Little Pony movie, which I was really confused when I was trying to find the theatrical version, they found the cheapest way. They just cut the top and the bottom for it. So you paid a movie ticket to see less of the movie.
It's value right there.
So, and I was really confused because I was trying to find the DVD release, or at least the highest quality version possible, which was in full frame, and I was thinking, did they crop the sides to because a lot of companies release it like that. But no, you paid for less, and it really. And I think the plan was really to bank on the fact that you would have a VHS release afterwards, because a lot of the shots, kind of, you can see that, you can really see that Megan's head is really awkwardly framed like that. It does feel a bit tighter, like you really look more at the middle and you look at the pony here who's looking at the rainbow of light. So that's something that makes it more interesting to focus on that, but it feels like an afterthought. Talking about an afterthought, as it turns out, I think the release that they had on DVD, they also messed up because it's advertised in the credits as in stereo, but the mastering is done in mono. So I don't know how they messed that up. Yeah.
I'm trying to even imagine. That was a big thing when I watched it, because we screened this beforehand, and we were just like, all right, we need to watch to get a base level, because I had seen the My Little Pony movie before, but I hadn't really analyzed it. I had just seen it at a Brony meetup in passing, watch it as a goof. But I watched it, and analyzing it, I have to sit there and I wonder, is this an effective toy commercial? I don't get the feeling of that. I don't get the feeling that it's a good introduction to the series. So I have to wonder, being a parent, sitting there with your child in 1986 in a hot theater, is anybody having a good time in that theater at that point? Does it work? Does the kid want the toys after? Everyone is loud and angry to each other for a lot of the movie. It's really interesting. I'm sorry I took that from talking about theater tech to that, but I'm trying to picture being in a theater for this.
You were talking about loud and angry, and I was showing the audio.
Yeah.
You'll notice there's no moment where it's quiet. There's still sound.
Yeah.
And I was trying to find a spot, because in how in good movies you have moments where the music just stops and things just go quiet and things. Moments of introspection for the characters to reflect on what they did. Like those good movies tend to use that. Not that movie.
No.
There's music all the time.
Yep.
They wouldn't give a break to the composer who had to make 89 minutes of that. For a movie they had to rush in 16 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was me, exactly. And it does feel like they were very concerned at the time that they would not be able to keep a child's attention the entire time. So just make it loud. There is no break. As we'll talk about later, most likely, with the 2017 film, and I'm sure you can all remember, and in the G5 film, there are moments where they let the characters and the scenes and the emotions of it breathe. You can actually feel a scene. There's patience. But here, like I said, it's a lot of yelling, a lot of singing. Everyone is nasty to each other. And it's called My Little Pony, the movie. So...
And nobody ever shuts up. It feels like the screenplay. You know when you had a note card where you have, basically for an exam, and you just have that tiny card and you need to write as much possible to cram as much things as possible? The screenplay feels like that. There's no moment where a character just stops talking. It feels like he needs to put more words or a bomb explodes.
Right. And it feels like, I think we talked about this as we both saw it, and I was DMing you about it, and I was like, this feels like someone wrote these vignettes of scenes, because I don't even think we've been talking about this for a while, but I don't think we've even talked about the plot quite yet.
There's one?
There is a plot where there are a bunch of witches who are upset because there's a bunch of witches on a mountain that nobody has ever talked about in the series. And these witches are upset because the ponies are happy. That is the central conflict. Their ponies are happy, so the witches are unhappy. So they send the smooze down on them. Not the green smooze, but the purple smooze. There's a great song. It's the only great song in the movie, but they sing a song, and now the ponies are displaced. They have to go find somebody that can help them get their home back or find a new home. One of these new homes is a play set. It is just a play set. A wizard gives them a play set. But all of these are cut in a way like, oh, there's a 10-minute scene where they encounter a big giant, I don't remember if it was a spider, but it was like a giant monster. Or they encounter these rock guys. One of them's voiced by Danny DeVito. He's kind of wasted, unfortunately. But all of these are cut in a way where I DM'd Minty at one point, and I'm like, this feels like they wanted to take these little clips of this movie and just edit them down into episodes that they could just show completely disconnected from each other. Or you put them between commercial breaks, which I imagine is what they probably did. If they didn't do that, it feels disjointed, and it feels like a new story with these characters starts up every 10 minutes, and it's not, if I watch a lot of movies, if you couldn't tell. I watch a lot of movies, and it doesn't do for a good movie watching experience when your movie is starting over every 10 minutes. It's very odd. Instead of a 3-act structure, it's about a 9 or 10-act structure. It's very different. And I will say it was interestingly hard to watch in that way. But I've seen worse, and as we'll talk about, I've seen worse. But it was really, really weird to sit there and watch it. And again, think about someone watching it in a theater.
Talking about theater, as it turns out, the print that they had for the movie, for the DVD, they went with a release print. You can see all the cigarette burns that they had to tell the projectionist to swap the projectors from one reel to another.
And I think you pointed out that the prints that are out there, and I'm pretty sure it is available on Blu-ray.
I think they're still on the DVD with a Blu-ray of the 2017 movie.
That's right.
Yeah.
But you have pointed out that even on those prints, on those copies, the print on the DVD is still just what looks like a VHS rip, or it's just like it's not. There's no film negative. If there was a film net, because that's the original print of the movie that they have that likely looks the best. It's what they do now where they'll restore something, and if it comes out in 4K, they'll be like, oh, it's restored from the negative, the original thing. In this case, and the copy I had as well, it looked like they just took a VHS copy of the original one and just replicated it, which eventually it'll degrade and it doesn't look good. If the original negative exists, it's likely damaged beyond repair, or it's just gone. I wouldn't be shocked if Hasbro didn't take care of it at all.
Well, at least there's not going to be enough wear from people watching it.
Yeah, unfortunately. I don't want it to make it sound like we're dogging on this movie. We
But
kind of
we are.
We are, yeah, we kind of are. We didn't have an amazing time with it, but it was interesting. I can't say it was an uninteresting experience sitting through the original My Little Pony movie.
I'll talk quickly. Visually, the world layout, just the idea that most of the journey goes from left to right. So you have
Yeah,
you
you
have
said
the,
that.
the little kingdom from the ponies. They go to the wizard, then the Flutter Valley, and then you have it's implied that the volcano where the witches is, and then you have the human land, which is kind of there. It's really straightforward. At least you're not going to be too lost in the layout of the land. So that's one good thing that they got right.
Look at all those play sets that you could buy.
Yep.
See, 1, 2, 3.
Although
4.
the plastic in those play sets is probably now toxic. So
Yeah, it was the 80s. It was a different time.
talking about different times, I think we should talk about the next one.
Ooh, oh yeah, my favorite. Go ahead.
So
Yay.
So that's gonna be the most controversial one. My Little Pony: A Very Minty Christmas. I took that one because that was the first one of longer length than 22 minutes. The funny thing is that it first aired on Playhouse Disney on December 25th, which is dumb because you watch Christmas movies before Christmas to get prepared, not during, because that day you're probably gonna be celebrating with other people.
No, Dad's sitting there watching Playhouse Disney in front of the fireplace, drinking some eggnog. You put on My Little Pony: A Very Minty Christmas.
Of course.
Yeah.
And then it first aired on Toon Disney after Christmas.
After Christmas. That's when you want to be in the mood for Christmas, is 4 days after Christmas, clearly.
But here's the most controversial part. It says classic movies here. So
The Criterion collection up there, right?
I am not putting the emphasis on classic here. That's the DVD poster. But here's the VHS one. It
Whoa.
doesn't say anywhere it's a movie. Does it count as a movie since it didn't come in theaters? It's 44 minutes. Some people argue on that. Some people have very clearly defined that you need to watch it in theater with popcorn in a big room. Some people say that it can be on a TV. It's 44 minutes. The trailer doesn't call it, well, the trailer doesn't refer to it as a movie. Is it a movie? I don't care.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we had a debate over this because Minty suggested it, and I've seen A Very Minty Christmas before, and I'm like, I don't want to watch A Very Minty Christmas again. But B, I was like, it's 44 minutes. Can we count it? But eventually Minty convinced me with, why don't we just watch it anyway? And I'm like, all right. And I blame you, Minty, that me, a 26-year-old, was sitting in my room in the middle of February with a steak in front of me, watching My Little Pony: A Very Minty Christmas. And it's a sad state of affairs that you brought me to.
You think it's sad watching a Christmas movie in summer? I mean, that's what happened with Scoob.
Oh no, that's right. Yeah, it's a very artificial feeling. It's like eating a bunch of candy and getting really sick once you watch a Christmas movie out of season, because you're seeing all of this stuff where it's like, oh, it's Christmas, and it's like,
no,
this is already past. It's cold. I don't want to be reminded of any of this. As you'll show in a little bit, we'll talk about how it looks visually, but everything looks so saccharine and sweet, and it's like my eyes are getting a toothache just looking at it, as y'all will see in a moment.
At least the movie has a plot to follow that you can understand.
I was gonna say, to give it credit, it has a plot compared to the My Little Pony movie, the 80s movie. This does have a plot.
It's delightfully competent.
Actually, genuinely.
So I'm gonna talk a bit about the visuals. So here's a screen cap of the special. Do you see anything wrong with this? Right?
I like all of them floating.
Yeah, but it's not what I'm gonna say.
I know.
All the ponies have the same haircut. What happens when you're colorblind?
Oh.
The fact that they're mostly, besides Minty with her sock, it's mostly their cutie marks, which are blocked. What do you do when you have a wide shot like that?
They're all the same model.
In a way, I feel bad for them, for the colorblind people for watching it, but I also feel bad for anybody watching it.
Nah, you don't get it. This is the Snyder cut. This is how it was meant to be seen.
Christmas is great.
Christmas is gray.
There's also things that are delightfully competent, like the world layout. The fact that when you go from Ponyville to North Pole, it goes from left to right, and then when they come back, right to left. It works well. It's very, very effective. You're gonna also notice the lighting, like at night. This is supposed to be at night, and you don't notice it because it's bright as hell. Which is fine. You have the right to cheat, but this is weird.
That describes it very well, where the entire experience is very weird. And again, I said to you after I watched this, after I got done telling you, why did you make me do this, Minty? The other thing I said to you is that for as awkward and bad as the 80s My Little Pony movie was, at least in my experience, at least it was interesting. And for this, it's very much what you're... Okay, do you remember when you first told your family, your friends, that you were into My Little Pony? No, I heard no. You're blocking it out. But when you first tell them that, I guarantee this is the first thing that they think of in their head, and they go, oh, you watch My Little Pony. That's what it felt like watching this, where it's like, oh, this is what people think I watch. Okay.
It feels like secondhand embarrassment.
Can that be a pull quote? Put that on the front of the box. Feels like secondhand embarrassment. 2 thumbs up.
Well, when movie quotes on the posters are probably just gonna go, it feels ...
It feels.
Penswell.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's me. It's a movie.
Is it?
I was gonna say, is it a movie? I mean, Skinamarink is considered a movie, and it's just shots of hallways. So if that's a movie, I would say this is a movie. One person got my deep horror movie art house reference. I appreciate it. That was more than I expected. But yeah, it's an odd experience. But again, I didn't hate it. It was just weird to watch a Christmas movie that was so Christmassy in the middle of February. That's a time, and I don't know if I'll be doing it again. Anyway, let's talk about a better movie, please. Oh, there you go. I would like to talk about that one.
I won't say the exact numbers. I won't point too much about the numbers, but it made Badikis money, so they could have made a sequel.
They did. It was called Rainbow Road Trip.
Although, I'd like to point out, just to, egg on someone, the wrongest person in the world.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting because we translate from a TV show that exists to a movie, and one of the things earlier I was pointing out the aspect ratio. For once, it's a widescreen movie that was made in widescreen. So you have some challenges. For example, how do you frame Canterlot? I just took a screenshot from the show and I cropped it, and you're gonna notice there's a lot of sky, there's a lot of mountain, there's not a lot of Canterlot in the Canterlot. So what I understand they did with the design of the movie, they actually went and redesigned Canterlot to be a lot more horizontal, to take advantage of the fact the screen was wide. And it helps a lot.
Yeah.
You might be a bit confused as to why they did renovations of Canterlot just for the movie and they undid it afterwards. They probably had their reason, but it really helps to have a good idea of the sense of scale in the frame. Like that.
And they did try to maintain it in the seasons after the show. There were some changes where they tried to maintain a bit more of the look from it, but it definitely looks striking when you first see it. And for the record, I saw this movie 3 times in theaters. So I definitely recommend seeing it in theater. I don't know if it'll ever be in a theater again, but it's definitely an experience. I would kill to see it in theaters again. I would love to see the Sonic Rain Boom scene again in theaters. It's a time.
You have a lot of the fact that they use the frame that is really wide. It's really allowed to have very horizontal shots of action where you really see characters running from one side to the other, where it really takes advantage of the screen. For example, this shot, which looks incredible, you have the way that the perspective is framed, the use of 3D it really gives you a good idea of the sense of scale and the sense of speed involved in that shot. I was thinking back, was wondering if the movie really was worth it to be in that aspect ratio, and I think those shots make it worth it. For example, this shot, or you have other shots where you really appreciate the view, or the views of Canterlot.
Like objectively, that one you just showed, objectively to me, that is a beautiful shot.
I love
It
the
looks
lighting.
so good. I would actually like to ask you a question, because a lot of people in the fandom at least, whenever they talk about this movie, it seems like it's split down the middle on what people feel about the computer generation animation in it. Where do you stand on that?
I think it worked. A lot of people accused it of being very simplistic, which I was agreeing with the sentiment at the time, but it just dawned on me that if it went with more detailed models, it would really clash with the simplified pony characters, and it would clash a lot with the paintings that they would have. For example, just the way that this here is done in CG with the rest done in 2D, it works well with the level of detail you have. You don't need photoreal 4K models with PBR and all the little wrinkles. You don't need that for a stylized movie. You just need the verisimilitude in place.
Right. Yeah, that's entirely fair.
So there's also things like I was talking earlier about the world layout, because we had shots where it was going from left to right. And you see also left to right. And in this case, right to left when returning, the layout is really straightforward with the idea of going from Canterlot to the south. It's really a straight line. It really helps a lot for the way that you'd be able to read visually how it's going. You're not too confused by what is going on. You don't need someone to tell you every time you're going to Canterlot, you're going to Mount Eris. You feel like you know where you're going just by the direction.
Right.
It really helps.
And I think and to weigh in on screenwriting level, because I remember myself and my teammate in Riff Ponies Essential, when we first saw the film, it really dawned on us, because a lot of people criticize it of, well, it's not really the main Sixes movie. And I would kind of agree, because particularly Applejack and Fluttershy don't have a lot to do in the movie. They're not given a lot to do. It's mostly Twilight, Rarity, and Rainbow Dash get the bigger and Pinkie Pie, obviously. And a little bit of Spike, yeah. And there was a point made a lot where people would say, it's not the Ponies movie, it's Twilight's movie. And granted, that's true, but we also noted that it works sort of in a Joseph Campbell, hero with the hero's journey. It has to be Twilight's movie in a way, because she is the focal point. She's the main character of the story, ultimately. I guess it's debatable and that's the thing, is that it feels like for people who are established fans of the show might be disappointed, because they're like, well, I want to see my favorite characters on it. How do you think I feel that my favorite character in the show, Starlight, shows up for 5 seconds in the movie? But that's whatever. It was very clear it was the main Sixes movie and Twilight's story. So that kind of divided people. Where where I ask myself, is it satisfying to of an established fan base, or is it trying to get a general audience? And I think for a general audience, it works in a way, because it does, instead of doing what the 80s My Little Pony movie did, where it just throws you in with not even characters from the series. In the first 10 minutes, you're getting boom, 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 getting introduced to every little part of the ponies' personalities, and you're like, okay, these are the characters, these are what you need to know. It's difficult to separate yourself once you've dedicated 12, 13 years of your life to these characters and the show. But watching it, when we rewatched it for this, I did get the feeling of, okay, they're actually doing a good job, like what an actual film should do compared to the 80s movie where it feels like an extended TV show episode. In the 2017 film, they're actually introducing character. There's a story, and not to mention, there's moments to breathe. There's these great, watch it another time when you get the chance. I love the transitions between scenes where you'll have like roaring water after they hit the Solano's pirate ship out of the sky, and you're getting these roaring waters while all the debris is crashing into it. And it's this really muted moment where the music is settling and everything, and it hits the water, and then you get this transition right into when they're going to Mount Eris, and it's like, wow, that's really cinematic, and it works. It may not be Martin Scorsese Goodfellas, but it works as fundamentally as a movie, and compared to the two things that Minty made me watch beforehand,
sorry,
I agreed to it. Compared to those, this is cinematic, and it actually works, and I'm sitting there and going, I'm having a good time with this, separated entirely from, again, me dedicating 12, 13 years of my life to it. It's an enjoyable experience. I really do genuinely enjoy the 2017 film.
And it's also pretty interesting because if you compare, besides a very minty Christmas, what is the theme of the 86 movie? Like, usually you have a theme or at least a thought that actually ties everything together.
Right. You should be able to, in a sense, with a script, this is like textbook screenwriting, I guess. Typically, you should be able to boil down a movie's central theme or themes to a word or a sentence. I couldn't tell you what the theme of the 80s film was. Would you have any guess at all?
Which is bad, ponies good.
Yeah, that's about it. Which is bad, ponies good, buy the toy sets that we advertised. With the 2017 film, there's a lot about, obviously it's not the deepest stuff, but it is about teamwork and friendship and surpassing adversity and just being good to people, and we kind of need that. Yeah, exactly. But it works. For a lack of a better word or phrase, the 2017 movie, rewatching it, because it has a mixed opinion throughout the community, I know. I have a friend who hates it. He stopped participating in the fandom for a couple months because he thought people would hate him for not liking the movie. Ultimately, and like we said at the beginning, we can agree to disagree. You don't need to like the movie. I always feel firmly about that I would rather, if you like something I don't like, I wish I could appreciate it on that level. But in my case, I really appreciate a lot of what they tried to do in the movie. Does it always work? Maybe not. But the 2017 movie, it's really effective in my eyes from an entertainment perspective. Whether someone who's never seen the show before, like we said with the Hollywood Reporter reviewer, that's a whole other subject. And I know everyone pointed at the Rotten Tomatoes score when it came out and was like, oh, well, the critics hate it, but the general audience love it. Review bombing a Rotten Tomatoes fan score will do that. They're not going to like it. A general audience who, again, watches Martin Scorsese or Quentin Tarantino or foreign films, they're not going to be totally into the candy-coated ponies. But I don't know. I like it. I have a good time with it.
I mean, what's the worst case if they don't like it? They can't ban you from watching it.
It's true.
There's no cinema police.
Right, exactly. You could watch bad movies all you want. Trust me, I do it plenty. No?
Okay, so we were talking about a movie that tried to follow a TV show. Let's go with the other way around. A movie that starts a TV show.
Ooh, okay.
So, basically, My Little Pony: A New Generation was seen as a pilot to the TV show, done by a completely different studio from the TV show. You might notice a few things that do differ from the TV show and the movie. For example, the aspect ratio, which matches the one from the previous movie. We'll cover it a bit later. One thing that I did find funny, because I was looking for some technical details on IMDb, they list Ireland as the filming location. We might have found the gate to Equestria.
They filmed it on the same lot that they filmed Banshees of Inisherin on. Colin Farrell was in the back.
Talking about the location, they finally give us a map, and you see that left to right.
Ooh.
Although you can see that it basically goes from left to right and then comes back to Bridalhood, which is pretty interesting, but the way it's framed just goes from left to right in the frame. I'd like to talk also about the 3D animation. So they used as a renderer Arnold, a photoreal renderer. If you keep those settings as they are, the technical details of the lighting should be mostly photo accurate. It does assume that the light doesn't act as a wave but as a particle, the way it bounces. But the conservation of energy from the lights should be proper. Which means that in this shot, you see here the rim light on Izzy. It's stronger on her than the light behind that should be casting that light on them.
Yeah. That's really weird. I never noticed that. Okay.
And you're thinking, well, you don't notice it at first, and it really helps to have a layer of separation between her and the background, because without it, it might look a bit weird. And that's fine. Real movies do that a lot. I'll give you an example later. You have things, for example, the night scene. You have this scene where you have the fire, which is just emitting light over the characters, which is about as strong as the light from the sky. The movie is set around summer, so it's not for the heat. It's mostly just that it just looks weird without a fireplace. So it would probably look a bit more like this if it was more real, which looks fine, but it looks a bit jarring when you compare the visuals from earlier the movie that are very colorful, very bright. So they do cheat, and they cheat a lot. For example, you have this shot from earlier where you have just Izzy casting that shadow, and the sun is at a distance that's far enough that people just assume that the rays, when it comes to 3D rendering, they just assume that the rays that are emitted from the sun are parallel, which means that Izzy, in that shot, to be like that, she would either need to have a spotlight right behind her, or she would need to be really big. So, and you really need that partly because you want to have visuals that are striking, because you need to put the emphasis on the fact that she's really scary. Also, you have the fact that the shadow that she's casting shouldn't, because it would be overlapping, so it's the second source of light that you use just for that. Which is still, you also look at the softness, so it's a really big light that would be set behind her. So it would be weird. The approach that they usually do for that when it comes to movies is that they go with a color script. They basically go, they take a render that is completely flat, and then they paint the color, the palette they would like. So you have the example of the render at the end, and you have an idea of what they were aiming for, like the amount of bounce lighting in the character, the color temperature, the look, and the feel with the sky, and you really use it to set the tone of the scene. And it might not be the most realistic because it looks more painterly, and that's fine. There's non-diegetic lighting, for example, in bad movies. You can see, for example, that the light that comes here on the side just to try to get the emoji look is just, you can't really do that. You even have the rim light on both sides in the mirror, which you could probably get if you had the right angle, but they probably cheated just to get the right look. You also get that in live action movies. If you look at all the shots, you have the sun that is behind, and you see that the camera spins like almost at 180 degrees. And I think the way that the approach that they did is instead of flipping the camera, since they would have to worry about changing the exposure levels for the camera, they basically just went with keeping the camera there, just turning the actors around and changing just reading their lines. And it works. Nobody notices in the scene that the lighting is wonky, and that's fine. We have, if you look back at scenes like that, people don't mind because it doesn't need to look real. It just needs to have very similitude, the idea that it looks like how it feels.
I was going to add in, just because we've talked a lot about the tech, I did want to wonder, how do you feel this works in, saying, the new generation? How does it work in how it tries to connect G4 to this new series and generation coming in? Because for me, I felt it was well incorporated in that, other than the intro, which is fun and it brings you back into that world a bit, and it's kind of heartbreaking in a way, but at the same time, does it work, G5, the G5 movie, does it work in a bridging gap between Friendship is Magic and what we have now with Tell Your Tale and Make Your Mark?
I think it does in a way because it sets the main six more as a legend, which allows for a bit of creative freedom with the way that they handle it, the way that they approach it. One of the things that, because they often call it a soft reboot, where you try to redo the same thing but in a way that follows. A lot of people compare with The Force Awakens, where they basically pin all the events of the previous movies as some sort of legend, and they probably overdid it the way that they did the involve the characters, but the approach of following the legacy of previous characters is pretty interesting. It's also because it, in a way, you don't really need to know all the things that Twilight Sparkle did, because you only have basically just have a short version of the legend being told in the intro, in a way that the fans will be able to have fun with, and the newcomers will be able to have a good idea of the main themes.
I think the epitome of that sort of effect there is, and Ace and I have talked about this as well, where there's the particular sequence where Zip shows them the old castle, or that old place, and you see the Wonderbolts poster up on the wall, and there's no words said about it. Nobody says anything or says, oh, well, that's the Wonderbolts, they were an old aerial team back, you just see it. And people who know the series and know G4 are like, oh, wow, like you get that feeling of emotion. But even visually and through the music, because the music in those moments really works in New Generation as well. But for someone who's not familiar with G4, they can look up at it and see that, and you get the visual and cinematic language of that's this far off thing that was great, and this previous, like you said, a legend almost. It's again, comparing apples to oranges here. You compare that to the G1 movie, you're telling a real story with the filmmaking and telling it with the sound and the visuals and the characters and the way they react and emotions and just quiet. You can do so much in a movie with quiet, and that particular moment is one of the better ones in A New Generation, where it's all about the visuals and you don't even need to know, you can know everything about it and nothing about it, and you still get a lot from sequences like that.
Talking about visual language, one of the things that you notice in the movie, they play a leitmotif in all the scenes where they approach, for example, the crystal, or something that has to do with the past, where it goes, do-no-no. And you'll notice they don't have the same composer in Make Your Mark, so it's absent entirely. It might contribute to the fact that it feels a bit jarring. It's really interesting because they really wanted to have a different sound from Friendship is Magic to really set it apart, at least for A New Generation, which I respect a lot. I don't like it when they're just trying to redo everything from the past like it was, because there's no point to redo the same thing. So just the idea of having that connective tissue within the movie is great. It really helps just to tell the viewer in a non-verbal way that it connects thematically. Quite a shame that they didn't. And I wonder if it's probably not due to copyright issues, because Hasbro does own it. I think the two director teams that they had for the movie and TV show, I think they just had different visions.
Yeah. Oh no, definitely. And it probably also similar to what happens with the voice acting team, where it's different between between the movie and the show, down to affordability or time, or just go, like you said, a different direction. Even then, speaking of it as a piece of film, it also just really works. How do you feel about the characters in terms of, I guess, do you feel that they get all the same amount of time to show them off? Because a big criticism a lot of people had was Pip is not really in the movie much, or you don't get a lot of certain characters in the movie. Where do you stand on that?
Well, the way I see it, it's more about a movie about Sunny. So I think the fact that the other characters don't have as much screen time is not as important in the grand scheme of things, because it's a lot about Sunny realizing, mostly trying to connect with what her father was teaching her about, with the magic of friendship and the. So it's less about the fact that all the characters had that much screen time, and more the fact that they interacted together. So just the idea that you had to have just the all the conversations that they would have, all the moments that they had. For example, the scene with the fireplace, that really helped to connect Izzy and Sunny together. Just the fact that they had a connection and understanding the stakes that are there, it really helps the movie itself feels a lot more rewarding at the end. So.
Right. It definitely does, and it works really well in tandem with, like, if you were to watch Friendship is Magic and jump right back into this, really seamlessly could work, or you could just watch it by itself again and it would still work really well, which is probably what a lot of the intended demographic is probably doing right now, where it's just, oh, well, this is My Little Pony. For us, it's new My Little Pony. For them, this is the first thing they'll be seeing of it, and I think it works. Again, it really works. It's on Netflix now, so it's a bit more different proposition. I talked a little bit about that last night in another panel about, weekly release schedules, and is this movie getting seen as much as, My Little Pony, the 2017 film, being on Netflix. They don't release their figures, so you don't know. But it seems like it was fairly popular. I know the New Generation was number one trending for a while on Netflix, so it has an audience, definitely. I mean, you're all still here, so I imagine you're an audience for it. See, exactly. So I feel like it definitely works. I suppose a question to be asked before we open the floor is, what was your favorite out of these four that we covered?
Definitely A New Generation.
Okay.
At first, I thought I would prefer more the 2017 one because of the character arc that you had with Tempest. But and while I really liked it more for what I had in my mind, the kind of story that they could have explored afterwards, which. It's fair. It's a lot in terms of movie viewing experience is also the impact it has on you. But I felt like A New Generation was a lot more focused because with 2017 one, they had so many characters to follow through, and I did like the idea because I wanted to explore the idea of making new friends along the way, and they really won they really won the day thanks to friendship, which really connects with the theme of the TV show, which I can't really say with the 1986 one yet.
No.
So.
There are no themes in the 1986 one. But it's interesting because I prefer the 2017 film, and I think what does it is it gets these little things that I give the edge for it over A New Generation. Mainly, I really love the Daniel Ingram score. I love his music in it. So many of the songs I found myself just like, this is really great. It's like Alan Menken, 1990s Disney. I don't know if that was the inspiration for a lot of it. I know Daniel Ingram talks about his influences, but it really felt very Disney Renaissance-esque, and that obviously not at the same caliber, but it had a feel to that, and I loved the little moments of filmmaking like that. I prefer the voice acting because the voice actors
are the real ones.
Right, yeah. But even like the celebrity voice actors, I didn't hate them. Some of them worked in the roles they were in. I wasn't big on Michael Pena. Michael Pena was the only one where I was like, it's just Michael Pena riffing in a booth. But like Emily Blunt works, Liev Schreiber works. A lot of Tay Diggs, yeah, a lot of them really worked for me. I never, because I was listening for that while watching it. I was like, because now there's a reputation where there's celebrity voice actors, and it's like, oh, they're just doing a voice. It's like what Chris Rock once said about voice acting, and it made everyone, including Tara Strong, really upset, where it's saying, oh, I just go in a booth and do a voice. I listened for that in the 2017 movie, and I was like, okay, maybe I'll hear it. I didn't hear it that much. Maybe I'm just, forgiving, but everyone seemed committed. And then obviously, halfway through the 2017 movie, I'm sitting there and listening to the voice performances and the songs and everything, and it occurred to me, we really, really don't know, we won't know for years how lucky we were to have as amazing of a central voice cast as Friendship is Magic had, and what the 2017 movie had, because they all work. They're all really good voices. And for me, those little details, the music, the voice performances, just the filmmaking of it. Jason Thiessen is great, really directs it well, and it's, Megan McCarthy writes well, and they had some people, I think one of the screenwriters...
From Ice Age?
From Ice Age, but also another one from Disney's Mulan. There's really good, there are great moments in it, and I feel like that pushes it over a new generation to me. But New Generation is still very, very solid. So I say 2017, you say New Generation. So, and I respect that. Again, you respect it.
We got 5 minutes for questions.
Any questions for us?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sure. What was the what was the question?
They asked why no Equestria Girls.
Oh, why no?
And
basically, we wanted to cover at least enough of the movies, so we just didn't have the time to cover them. We're actually proposing a sequel to this panel about Equestria Girls if you're interested. So
I would love to talk about the Equestria Girls series, because there is a lot to talk about, I think. A lot of good, a lot of interesting, and also I haven't seen them in a while. I don't know how long it's been since I've seen the original Equestria Girls, but I would need multiple hands to count how many times I've seen Rainbow Rocks, so that would be interesting. So I would be down for that, personally.
Oh, yeah.
I am still of the mind that we should do a third one where we talk about the Brony documentaries. I want to do that.
Sequel bait.
Yeah, exactly. Teasing, this is like our, we're like teasing a cinematic universe right here, putting it at the end credits. Any other questions?
Did you guys hear about the leak? I don't know if it was leaked or whatever. There was supposed to be another second Gen 4 MLP movie where I saw, I think it was an EQD, there were screenshots of concept art of an underground city, and it was supposed to be focus on Spike or something. I don't know if you guys know about that.
There were multiple, there's been a lot of, there's multiple different things that have said, there was going to be another theatrical My Little Pony G4 movie. I think one of them ended up, it went quiet, and then they just produced it as Rainbow Road Trip, if I remember correctly. That was one of them. I remember there was a previous treatment for the 2017 movie that involved,
Humans?
What?
The one with humans, it was kind of like the Smurfs.
Yeah, that was the one that Sony pitched. Sony wanted to. The 2017 film was distributed by Lionsgate, which, say what you want about how they did in that. Sony wanted to distribute it, but they basically pitched to Hasbro that they wanted to make it the Smurfs, the Neil Patrick Harris Smurfs, where the ponies are in an animated world, and then they go to the real world where it's, New York City and all that. And I just would have hated it. I just would have hated it. Yeah, I was going to say, it's funny. Hasbro, as far as I've heard, Hasbro actually said to them, no, we're not doing that.
I wonder how the person who pitched it sleeps at night.
And then I know there's been other things that people have talked about where I think there was a treatment where Celestia and Luna's brother would be the villain, and that ended up becoming the thing in the comics, which was Cosmos, I think. So that's a leftover from that. I can't 100% guarantee that was what it was, but I heard that. I highly recommend getting the My Little Pony the movie art book, because there's a lot of unused concept art that didn't make it that shows up in that book, and it's also just a gorgeous art book. Get more art books, movie art books especially.
Whoever was originally supposed to be in the movie as the original owner of the Staphylococcus.
Oh, there you go. See?
One more.
So I'm not super familiar with G5. I haven't watched a lot of the series myself, but I was wondering if what are your opinions on G5 so far, and do you think it has potential to go further and become better? And what's the comparison with G4?
I think there's a lot more to take in with it, because you have the Netflix series and the YouTube series, which definitely makes it an interesting thing to talk about. It seems like a lot more of the story focused is the Netflix series. And then you have the more slice of life, really fun, silly, zany stuff that we liked a lot in G4 in the YouTube series. I enjoy both. I honestly like the little bite-sized ones on YouTube. I might be in a minority on that, but I have fun with those. But I really am intrigued to see where it goes. I don't know how you feel, Minty. We actually haven't talked about how we feel about the G5 series quite a lot. We talk more about the movie, really.
I liked it. I like so far. It's not the best thing ever, but it has a couple things that I feel FIM did lack. For example, if you look at the last 3 episodes of the second chapter, they actually have a continuous storyline that is set in a way where every episode has its own story, but it continues. So you have the unicorn sleepover that actually follows with the dragon episode, and I really like the approach because it allows to tell a more grand story that actually has more connective tissue together in a way that you don't really need to invest too much time in it. You can binge watch it, or you can just wait and just connect the dots afterwards. I like that approach. It really feels, because in some episodes you'd see, in FIM you'd see recurring elements from previous episodes, usually would be returning from the previous season. It rarely happened from within the same season. So just having one episode that just happens right after the other in G5 is just really interesting as a storytelling technique. So it looks like we ran out of time. We want to thank you all for coming. We're sequel baiting you for another panel.
Yes.
So
Film Bronies will return in Avengers. But no, thank you so much. This was a joy to run this with you, Minty. It was great to talk with you about filmmaking and ponies, and I hope you guys all enjoyed, and hopefully we'll see you at the next one. Thank you so much.